Welcome to the Late Night Gamecock Show from Chief Sports South Carolina. Here are your hosts, Matt Anderson and Alex Jones of thebigspur.com.
Well, welcome into the Late Night Gamecock Show. Alex, it is August 27th. Do you know what that means?
It's game week.
Yeah, Alex knows what it means. It's game week. It's game week, and Alex is the day of what everybody is doing at training camp, preseason, all of that nonsense. Yeah, Alex, we can hear you, by the way.
Okay.
So, Alex, what's it feel like to be done with spring practice, done with summer practice, done with weights? Now it's just time to see what the Gamecocks have in them for this upcoming football season.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a long time coming since, in the football season and into spring practice, and now preseason camp's over and it's time to start actually talking about a game here.
Yeah, so the Gamecocks open with Old Dominion. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but to get things started, Alex, were you at Shane Beamer's press conference today?
Yep, I was there.
All right. Well, what are your takeaways? What did you find interesting, and where should we go from here?
Yeah, I thought, a few of the interesting things he brought up. One, it doesn't seem like there's any new injuries from what we learned about on Carolina Calls last Thursday. Obviously, he mentioned Shane Beamer mentioned Jakai Moore and Aaron Parks are both guys who seemed like could be out for a little while. And, that was the only two guys he mentioned today, again, when he got to his little injury part of the press conference. A couple other things, I thought one of the bigger interesting things, but he said Rocket Sanders isn't going to be on any type of, snap count or pitch count on Saturday. So it sounds like, we've all been hearing that he's full go, and it sounds like that's going to be the case come Saturday. And I thought another thing that kind of stood out to me was just how much in depth he went on Old Dominion. I think it may just kind of be a message to, the players and the fan base, just how much you have to respect Old Dominion, because they good Sun Belt team who can come up and beat anybody. They've beaten Virginia Tech and had Wake Forest really close last year at home. So they're just kind of making sure everybody knows, like, you can't just sleepwalk through this game. You got to take it seriously.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that he talked about the guys on staff at Old Dominion that have coached at Tennessee, coached at different Power 5 programs, and the fact that they're going to look a lot like Tennessee on offense. And this Old Dominion team has had success. The Sun Belt has proved spoiler to a number of different Power 4, Power 5, whatever you call them. Back in my day, Alex, they were called Power 6. I don't know what you call it now.
We just keep going down.
Yeah. Eventually it's going to be Power 2 and there's going to be nothing, and that'll be fun too. But anyway, just the fact that this team has some talent. They have a linebacker who I think is a preseason All-American, maybe in their division or overall. I know that you talked about this player when you did the first schedule preview article way back when, and we talked about in this show, but that he's nothing to mess around with. He's a pretty good kid.
Yeah, obviously a very proven player. I can't remember the exact number of tackles, but it's something incredible that he had. And, was an All-American last year and, stuck around at Old Dominion and, has a chance to have another big year this year. So he's going to be a guy that they're going to have to account for on offensive line and the run game, pass game, everything. He's a guy they got to watch out for.
Yeah, and we'll preview this game in depth here in a little bit. But actually, Phil, the best producer in the game, just said that linebacker is 120 tackles away from the NCAA record. Alex, do you know if he's like a fifth-year senior, or has he done this all in 4 years, or will be 4 years?
I'm not 100% sure. I need to look to see on their roster to see what he is. I can't remember what year he is, but he's been there for a few years. He's a senior. So, he's had some time to get those tackles, and, being 120 away from the NCAA record, just looking at what he's done the past few years, I think you'd have to imagine, barring injury, he's got a good chance to get to that.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. So, he's probably the playmaker there, and we'll get to that in a second. But I do want to talk to you really quickly about the depth chart. Have you had a chance to look at this, Alex? I know you have.
Oh, of course, yeah. It's National Depth Chart Day. You can't miss it.
Yeah, depth charts mean different things to different people. I understand that. You look at Tennessee's depth chart, I think they have 15 oars at every position. But at South Carolina, and we talked about this last week, Alex, we know who the quarterback is, and it's Lenore Sellers. We know who the running back is, and it's going to be Rocket Sanders. After that, it gets kind of creative when you look at wide receiver. And we've talked about this a million times. I know you've talked about this on Inside the Gamecocks, but just so everybody knows, it looks like it's going to be Vandrigas Jacobs. And I'm not saying he's wide receiver 1, not what I'm saying. And then Jared Brown or Nick Harbor. And then you go to Gage Larvadane or Mazio Bennett or Peyton Mangrum or Luke Doty. So, yeah, Phil's the best in the business for a reason. So he's pulled up this depth chart here. Alex, let's look through this and let's just go through after quarterback and running back. You got Jared Brown and Nick Harbor. Anyone that's played NCAA 25 knows that Nick Harbor is the way you win every game, every season. But any surprises here at wide receiver? Or is this kind of what you expected?
No, I think probably after last week, I would expected Dre Jacobs and Jared Brown to be a starter, and I thought Harbor had a chance to be in that spot, but he's going to play a lot still, and with that spot with the 3 oars, I kind of lean toward Gage Larvadane or Mazio getting the start there, but I think for one, it shows the depth that they have, and maybe there hasn't been, and Dow Lug has mentioned, there's not much separation, hasn't been much separation in the preseason camp, but all of those guys are going to play, and we'll learn a little bit about them here on Saturday.
Yeah, well, what's really interesting to me, like looking through this depth chart, and I appreciate Phil putting it on the screen for us, but Jared Brown, transfer. Dalvion Campbell, transfer.
Yeah.
Paige Larverdane, transfer. Mazio Bennett, freshman. Dre Jacobs, transfer. Tyshawn Russell, second-year player. For those Gamecock fans that say like, oh, it's the same old, like this is going to be the same thing we've always seen, like I beg to differ, and it'll continue when we go through the offensive line.
Yeah, and I thought, with Mazio, I think it's really kind of impressive that he, being a true freshman is right up there. And, I talked about this earlier on the show, like kind of pretty impressive that he's up there with these transfers who have played some college football, like Jared Brown and Gage Larverdane and Dalvion Campbell. He's right up there in the depth chart with them. So, I think we've heard a lot of good things about Mazio Bennett and, had a pretty good spring practice, good spring game, and it's only carried over into preseason camp. But it should be exciting to see what this group can accomplish.
Yeah, and when we get to our like top 5 preseason predictions here in a little bit, like I mean that'll be self-evident when we say what our predictions are. But at left tackle, I think it's interesting Josiah Thompson or Tree Babalade, or I think it's gonna be Josiah Thompson.
Yeah.
But then you look at Kamar Bell. I thought it was interesting that Marky Anderson is listed on the second string. That's a guy that I've kind of been waiting to see what will happen with him from an injury standpoint. Like the talent's there. So we'll see what happens there. And then for all the people that say like, okay, well, a transfer is all of a sudden at the top of the depth chart, the offensive line must stink. Well, I don't know about you, but I was not expecting Marky Anderson to be listed on the 2 deep.
No, me either. And just the key for him is, obviously dealt with the injury last year, but then preseason camp was a little limited injuries. And, I think it's a pretty good sign that he's already listed on the depth chart, just from a health standpoint where he's at.
Yeah, you look at Vershawn Lee, I think that's pretty much a given. I mean, Shane Beamer's talked about him at length being maybe most respected player on the team. And so that's a given. Then you go over to Torricelli Simpkins and Trevon Ball. I think that's interesting. I do think it was a nice nod by Shane to say like, okay, look, Torricelli has won this, but these guys are going to play. And you look at right tackle, Kason Henry and Jatavius Shivers. I think as a Gamecock fan, and I would think a Gamecock fan would want to see the same 5 every game this entire season. Just know the coaching staff has figured out who they want to go to. But everything that I've heard, everything that I have, been privy to says that a lot of these guys are going to play. Like, I don't know if this offensive line is set in stone. What's your take on that, Alex?
Yeah, and I think what you said about, fans want to see a starting 5, consistent starting 5, like, throughout a season, you're going to have injuries. I mean, you saw what happened last year. You hope it doesn't happen to that extent, but there's going to be injuries. And it seems like this year they have the depth to kind of overcome some of that. I think if you look at, a guy like Tree Babalade, if he ends up not officially getting that start in game 1, he could be a guy who could, if he needs to fill in at left tackle or right tackle, he can do that. You got Marky Anderson, who's a guy they're very high on, who can fit in at either guard position. And, Vershawn Lee, I mean, even though he's listed and is going to get the start at center, he can move around kind of like he's done his whole career. So they have depth at the offensive line. And it seems like, they can maybe, if injuries do happen again, it seems like they could be right. It kind of help. You can be in a good spot to fill those.
Well, it's interesting to me, Alex, and maybe you might agree, disagree. I think the offensive depth chart is more interesting than the defensive depth chart, just because I think that the defense is pretty rock solid, in my opinion. But you look at it at wide receiver, Dawid Loggins said last week that like nothing's set in stone. Like these guys are still competing. And I just wonder if that's still the case on the offensive line. Like my gut says that it is the case. And these guys are still going to find who mess with one another. But the fact that you have Tree and Javon, who I think both were freshman All-Americans, and they are on, second team, that's a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, when it's been kind of projecting that Kamar Bell and Torricelli Simpkins can get those 2 guard positions, I think that's kind of been what you thought about. It's just, I think it says more about those guys being able to come in and take those spots as experienced players more so what it says about Tree and Trovine. I don't think it really says anything bad about those guys. Like, when you think back to last year, they just kind of got thrown in there due to the injuries, and both of them performed really well. And I think having those two having those years that they did last year, it's only going to help them in the future, and obviously helps provide depth this year.
Yeah, I think so too. And I just look at it and I say, like, wow, for the first time in my entire 35 years on this planet, it seems like this is the second or third time that the Gamecocks have 8 or 9 offensive linemen that can get the job done, which is incredibly important. At tight end, I don't think there's any, real reveal here. I think Josh Simon and Brady Hunt were always going to be the starting 2 tight ends, especially when they go to 12 personnel. Josh Simon is a guy that I have a lot of high hopes for. I thought that last year, for better or for worse, Trey Knox was a critical piece of the offense. And, when you look at the offensive line and what they had to do to protect Spencer Rattler, Trey Knox was a pretty good blocking tight end. Maybe not the best, but a pretty good one. But I mean, when you look at Michael Smith and Maurice Brown backing them up, I feel pretty optimistic. Don't you?
Yeah, when coming into preseason camp, we, like you mentioned, knew about Josh Simon and Brady Hunt, but you knew Michael Smith had the potential just from what you saw as a recruit. But I mean, that guy has got into camp and has flashed and has made himself to where he's probably going to be a big contributor for this team. And Maurice Brown's one of the more intriguing players, I think, on this depth chart right now, just from what he can bring to this team. Just the work. I mean, he was a big time special teams player for them last year. And now with him being, kind of improving in the weight room, I think he went from like 234 to 252, somewhere around that. So he's put in the work in the weight room. And, Shane Beamer's mentioned him and Michael Smith as a guy who are going to play a lot this season. So, they have we keep talking about depth on this team, and especially when we get to defense, going to keep talking about depth. But they, kind of built some depth there in the tight end room with those 2 guys.
Yeah, I think, like, to tie a bow on this before we go to defensive depth chart, I'm not worried as I have been in the past. I feel pretty good about this offensive unit. I think that, Lenore Sellers is ready for this. I think having Rocket Sanders behind him is going to be just the biggest benefit in the world for a redshirt freshman, a quarterback. But let's go ahead and go over to the defensive line depth chart, and we'll analyze this. Alex, so I know Phil's getting this ready right now, but were you surprised to see the defensive line depth chart? Because that was one of the things that I was a little curious about, how all this would shake out.
Yeah, I think probably one of the bigger surprises that came from this depth chart for me, at least, was Jati's Gear being on a potential starter at edge. Like, he was a guy who, I'm not going to say we didn't hear a whole lot about, but apparently this guy's just been consistent throughout camp and has earned that spot to potentially be a starter. But I think when you look at the defensive line, including edge and defensive tackle, like when you look at the depth chart, you can just see the depth that they have. I mean, because you look at defensive tackle, you got 6 guys there who you feel really, really good about being, on the field. And same for edge. Like, Dylan Stewart's a guy who's a 5-star freak, and he's got technically 2 guys in front of him at edge, and it all kind of depends on situation and stuff. Like, just because he's 3rd on the depth chart doesn't mean he's going to be 3rd on the field or whatnot. But because Dylan Stewart's going to play a lot, but I think once again, just a lot of depth on that defensive line.
Well, I think it's kind of what Shane talked about today when he talked about the depth chart, and like essentially everybody you see on this depth chart is going to play on Saturday.
Yeah, and play a lot.
But looking at it, like Gilbert Edmond, he knows the system. He is the kind of co-starter, I guess we could say, at defensive end. And then Jasius Gear is the kid, or Jatius, I mean, however you pronounce it. But that's a guy that J.C. Sherbert from inside the Gamecocks has been high on for a very long time. Injuries kind of derailed his first year in Carolina. But the fact that you have DeAndre Jules listed as the 3rd defensive tackle behind Alex Huntley, Nick Barrett, and then DeAndre Jules, that was a starter at Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And look, say what you want about the ACC, but you have a starter at Pittsburgh listed 3rd on the depth chart. And I think it goes back to what we've talked about a lot, like not very worried about the defensive line. I don't think I'm very worried about the linebackers. We've talked about this, but Bam Martin Scott and Debo Williams, I mean, just really, really good players that can get east to west, north to south. Demetrius Knight Jr., another kid that was a transfer. You have Bengley Kamara, another kid that was a transfer, and like Mo Kava. And it was interesting to me that Fred Johnson, JR, has found his way onto the depth chart as a true freshman.
Yeah, I just from what the staff thinks about him, it probably shouldn't be too surprising that he made his way onto the depth chart. And they're really, really high in him. And I think it's good for him to have some of these other, older, experienced players in front of him and be able to learn from, and to have that year. He's going to play a lot, especially on special teams. It's probably going to get some time at linebacker, but probably shouldn't be too surprising that guy found his way onto the depth chart. And I think one of the guys who's probably being slept on a little bit is probably Bengali Kamara, for what he can do. I think he's, a really solid depth piece that, could probably start at a lot of schools too. And, with this linebacker room, I think you like Debo Williams and Van Martin Scott to get the start. But, Demetrius Knight and Bengali Kamara are right there too. And, his fresh legs coming in there it can be good for South Carolina.
Well, it was interesting to me, like looking at this depth chart, and especially a linebacker, when you talk about South Carolina to upgrade talent. But if you look at the last 4 games of last season, linebacker was not a problem. And the fact that the same linebackers that started the last couple games for the Gamecocks last year are still the starters now with increased competition, I think that says a lot about that unit. Looking at the secondary, obviously DQ Smith and Nick Imawari, didn't think those guys would get supplanted. O'Donnell Fortune and Judge Collier at starting DBs. Judge looks like he's won this battle, but at the same time, Vicari Swan is going to have a role as well.
Yeah, I think I would imagine, just kind of my hunch is that Judge Collier is going to get that start at corner opposite of O'Donnell Fortune. But, Vicari Swain's a guy, I think it's really good for South Carolina that he's emerged to be able to, push for that starting cornerback spot, because the guy's just a playmaker, and you saw that on the high school film. And, I think it's just taken a year for him to work on being consistent, but he can be a guy who can come in and make plays right away. And he's going to be another one that you're going to see a lot of on Saturday night, because I think all those guys in the secondary, they're going to play, especially at those corner spots with Emory Floyd and David Spalding. So should be really interesting to see what those guys can do Saturday night.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting that Jalewis Solomon and Kelvin Hunter are kind of side by side there. And those are 2 guys that I know the coaching staff really, really liked Kelvin Hunter. You talk about DJ Swearinger type, that's what that guy is. And Jalewis Solomon, I know that the coaches said privately he looks like a 3-and-done guy. Mm-hmm. So, when you have the opportunity to have that kind of depth, it's a really, really big deal. So overall, Alex, I think I can speak for you and I both. Pretty optimistic about the depth chart. Obviously injuries, they play a piece in all of this, but Gamecocks right now look like they could withstand an injury or 2 at multiple positions. So the next thing that we're going to talk about, Alex, before we hit, actually we got 2 more things before we hit a commercial break, but Alex, I want to get your 5 big predictions for the Gamecocks this year. I have 5. I can go 1 through 5, or you can go. We can alternate. What do you want to do?
Let's see. Let's go with what you have first, and I'll see if I think I may have a lot of the same ones, but we'll see.
All right. So my first prediction is that Lenore Sellers combines for 30 total touchdowns this season, and that can be passing touchdowns, it can be rushing touchdowns. But when you look at 12 games in a regular season, all this stuff is regular season type stuff. 30, that's like 2.6, 2.7 per game. Do you think I'm way off there?
30 is a lot for a redshirt freshman, but I could see it. I maybe feel a little bit better closer to the 20 range, just because I think you have to like what they're bringing back in the run, or bringing in the running back room with Rocket and those guys. And, maybe they can account for a lot of those touchdowns kind of close to that goal line. But, it's not out of I don't think it's out as a possibility, but I'd probably lean a little closer to 20.
Okay. So we'll call it 25.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. The next one, Rocket Sanders rushes for over 1,100 yards this season. Thoughts on that one, Alex?
Yeah. I think I think a lot will go into that. If the offensive line can improve run blocking and offensive line can stay healthy, and it sounds like Rocket's getting back to his 2022 self from when he was a, All-American at Arkansas. Like, I think it's definitely possible. And it just depends on, like I said, and a lot goes into that, but, seems like he's ready to be able to get back to that mark.
Yeah, for me, I think he's going to rack up like a couple 150-yard games. So I'm not saying he's going to average, whatever it is, 120 yards rushing a game. I think there's going to be some 80-yard games, some 70-yard games, but I'm going to go 1,100 yards. This one's interesting, Alex, and I'm really interested to get your take on it. But I say that there'll be at least 5 pass catchers this year. So wide receiver, tight end, that catch at least 30 passes, and at least 5 players that go over 300 yards receiving this season. Just looking back at last year with Spencer Rattler, there were 4 guys that caught at least 25 balls and 5 guys that had 250 yards receiving. So 5 guys that get at least 300 yards and 5 guys that catch at least 30 balls. What's your take on that?
I think with the 5 guys catching 30 passes, I think you could see it just because when you look at last year, you pretty much had Xavier Legette. He was obviously the number 1 guy, and they're going to try to get him the ball every time. This year, I think you don't quite have that Xavier Legette type or number 1 wide receiver. So you're going to see Lenore Sellers kind of move around in the pocket and kind of, move around his progression. So, and, find different guys. So, I think there could be a chance of that.
Oh, I'm locking it in. I'm locking in all these predictions, by the way. All these things are going to happen. So just to recap, Lenore Sellers, 30-plus total touchdowns. I mean, maybe he wins the Heisman. I don't know. Rocket Sanders, 1,100 yards, and at least 5 Gamecock pass catchers catch at least 30 balls and get 300 yards. The next one, Alex, is the Gamecocks force more turnovers than they give up on offense, special teams, however you want to calculate that. But I think that the Gamecock defense is poised to force a lot of turnovers this year. And I think that Shane Beamer, and Dowell Loggins, to his credit, have all said that they want to give up minimal turnovers, which every coach says. But I'm thinking it's one of those situations where they force more turnovers than they give up. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good one. Just, when you look at what South Carolina's been able to do under Shane Beamer and under Clayton White, like, the first few years, they were really good at forcing turnovers. Like, not as much last year, but I think, they put a real emphasis getting back to that this year, and they know how important it is. And, obviously having a veteran defense, experienced defense is going to help you do that. And, I think they're also offensively putting a emphasis on, limiting turnovers. And I think Shane may have mentioned that today again. So, I think I agree with you on that one. I think that will happen.
All right. Well, the last one I got here, Alex, the last one I have is Lenore Sellers. And this is kind of cheating. But Lenore Sellers wins SEC Freshman of the Year honors.
I mean, if he can do the 30-plus touchdowns that you think, or account for 30-plus touchdowns, I think he's got a really good chance.
Yeah. I mean, because you're basically like comparing like how many other freshman quarterbacks are there in the SEC? Probably not a lot.
Right.
How many like freshman running backs, which is probably the easiest position to transition to. And then wide receiver. I think that you have a freshman quarterback, red shirt, whatever you want to say, but that's how they tally the votes. So I'm going Lenore Sellers with SEC Freshman of the Year. Okay, Alex, I told you I'd give you 2 or 3 more. I say the Gamecocks have over 4.5 all SEC performers, either the coaches or the media, team 1 through 3, over 4.5.
Over 4.5. Yeah, I think I'll take that. I would take the over. I think, especially defensively, I think you can think about Tonka Hemingway, TJ Sanders, Debo Williams. I mean, maybe one of those transfer guys there, Demetrius Knight or Bengali Kamara can sneak into there,
Nicky Murray,
DQ Smith, who knows if Adonal Fortune's ready to do, take that next step. So, I think it's a distinct possibility for that to happen.
All right, I'm going to give you 2 more. The next one is the Gamecocks block over 2.5 punts or field goals this year?
I would say 2. I think it kind of depends. We need to see kind of what Joe DeCamillo's kind of philosophy is. Like, obviously Pete Limbo was really aggressive on punt returns or trying to get to the punter. I think it kind of depends on his philosophy. But yeah, I'd say I'll go over. You said 2 over 2 over under 2?
Over under 2.5.
2.5. All right, I'll go over. I think they can get. I think they can get.
All right. And the last one, which might be the most exciting one, is that the Gamecocks go for 2 on their first offensive touchdown of the season.
No, I would say no. I don't think so. I think they want to get Alex Ferreira as comfortable as they can. So I'm not sure, unless it calls for it. I'm not sure you will see that.
All right, unless it calls for it.
Yeah,
Alex he's hedging his bets. Everybody, he's hedging his bets. All right. So before we take a commercial break, Alex, do you mind just rolling through the guys that are going to visit this weekend? So we got to do some recruiting. I mean, it's a Gamecock show, first game of the year. Who are the guys that are going to be visiting this weekend?
Yeah, so I think obviously you got to start off with what Hale McGranahan reported today, that Mikael Skinner is going to be in. Obviously, a guy who's committed to Cincinnati, but is coming out of Riverside High School and number 12 ranked tight end in the 2025 class. So it's pretty interesting that he's going to be in this weekend. I think it says a lot about where South Carolina kind of stands and potentially maybe being able to flip him. A lot of the commitments from that 2025 class are going to be in. Anthony Addison, Donovan Darden, Jaquavius Dodd, Lex Cyrus, Christopher Hatfield, Brian Rowe, Shedrick Surratt, Jaden Sowers, and Caleb Williams. And, I think one of the bigger maybe potential names in that one's Caleb Williams. I think, he's said that he's 1,000% committed, and it seems that way, 100% that he is. And I think for him to be able to come down from Virginia for the first game is pretty telling that he's still very much locked in, even with a team like Georgia, Virginia Tech trying to get in there. A couple more commits from that 2026 class going to be in, and Anthony Baxter and Keenan Britt. And so, I think it's a good group so far. And you got some 2026 guys from, we've been talking about this class that's got a really good chance to be a pretty solid class from top to bottom. A couple of guys that are going to be in from there are Zion Gales from Hemingway, South Carolina, and Jamel House, the tight end from Newberry. And so, I think, and Tamarian Watkins, too, is also going to be in, the safety from Northwestern. So, it's time to start for South Carolina. Going to really start recruiting that 2026 class heavily. Not that they haven't already, but because there's a lot of guys in that class, but they're going to have some of them in this weekend.
Yeah, and what I always say on this show, and Alex, you said the same thing, getting players on campus at this time of year is very important. You look back at the 2023 class and having players in for Tennessee game, monumental in the way the Gamecocks were able to close that class out because they built that groundwork early. And look, the Gamecocks, we're going to talk about the Gamecock schedule here coming up. There are a lot of opportunities for big time games and big time atmospheres for recruits to come to this season. And what the Gamecocks have done so far in the 2025 class is kind of set the groundwork. They already know who they're going to get likely, but this is really all for next year. So as always, I say make sure that you're paying attention to thebigspur.com because you got to look a year, 2 years in advance now. It's not necessarily, okay, well, here's a high school senior that's visiting. There will be some of those players, and there will be some of those players that kind of pop through their senior season. But just stay tuned to thebigspur.com. It'll be well worth your $9.99 a month. Also, if you guys missed it, Tailgate Talks this past week was ridiculously awesome. It had Steve Spurrier on with Pat DeMarco and Steven Garcia, and it was an episode you don't want to miss. So make sure you're downloading Tailgate Talks. Go to the Chief Sports Network app. Make sure you get it. If you missed it, it's fantastic. And Steven Garcia and Patrick DeMarco go in depth with Steve Spurrier. And look, whatever you think about how Steve Spurrier left it, it was an amazing run, and he holds nothing back in that interview. So make sure you get on Tailgate Talks. With that being said, we're going to take a quick break. And when Alex and I come back, we're going to give our South Carolina Old Dominion preview. and we're going to look at the Gamecocks schedule this year. And Alex is going to be put to the task to say what the Gamecocks record will be. So after this break, we'll see you in a sec.
I said, oh, Lord Jesus, it's a fire. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Emergencies and accidents happen. When you're in the middle of a fire or water event, all you want is for things to return to normal as soon as possible. Resto Pros of the Midlands is with you. RestoProsMidlandsSC.com. Open 24/7 when you need them. Quality that is guaranteed.
Down here in the South, we don't always see eye to eye. While our taste in college football teams, or what sauce, if any, goes best on a rack of ribs, or what to mix with our Dixie vodka might be up for debate, we can all agree there's nothing better than a Southern tailgate. And like our favorite college teams, our ingredients come from small towns and big cities. They're grown in Southern soil, are crafted by Southern hands, and proudly represent the South in our backyard and beyond. So raise a glass of Dixie Southern Vodka to celebrate being made in America and raised in the South.
Oh, man, the building is on fire.
During and after natural disasters or accidents, there can be a heavy loss to property. Resto Pros of the Midlands is here to help. Open 24/7. Call them when you need them. 803-493-0170. RestoProsMidlandsSC.com. Quality that is guaranteed.
All right, Alex, we are back, and we are going to give our South Carolina versus Old Dominion preview. I feel very confident in saying that you will pick South Carolina to win. Knocking on wood, I hope you do.
Yes.
But so that game is actually at 4:15, Williams-Brice Stadium. Alex will be there. I'll be there. Really looking forward to it. The way I look at this, Alex, and I think I told you this earlier, but I kind of do the implied odds with Vegas. I take the point spread and the over-under. And looking at Vegas right now, and I shouldn't say right now, I did this at 2 o'clock today, but I use DraftKings odds, and those are the odds we're going to use for every single thing I talk about tonight. But South Carolina is a 21-point favorite, and the over-under is 52 points. When you use the implied odds here, that says South Carolina will score 36.5 points and Old Dominion will score 15.5. So, Alex, really quick, what's your take on that? So let's say 37-15. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I think if South Carolina gets to 37 around there, obviously if that's offensively, it's a really good day. I got a feeling in this game there's going to be a non-offensive touchdown. I think special teams or either defense is going to find a way to come up with a touchdown in this game. I think offensively, you can put up, 28, 31 points. It's a really nice day to come out in your opening game and be able to do that because, opening game with so many new faces that you have offensively, there's a lot that's still come together for the offense, and being in the first game, you just never know. But, I got a feeling that, they are going to find a way to run the ball, which I think is going to be huge for South Carolina in this game, and not only this game, but this season. But, I think that will help Lenore Sellers kind of slowly get himself into the game in his first start.
Yeah, I think the 52 number is probably pretty good on the over-under. If I had to say over-under 15.5 points for Old Dominion, I think I would take the under. I think that this defense is going to have opportunities to do quite well through the first 3 quarters. That fourth quarter that everyone's been a part of at Williams-Brice Stadium, sometimes, there can be a couple of touchdowns or field goals scored. I think 36.5 to 15.5 is a decent number. I think the Gamecocks will score more than 36.5. And if you just kind of look at it, that's basically saying, 35 points, 5 touchdowns. Yeah. I think that, the Gamecocks will get 5 touchdowns and at least 1 field goal. I don't think there's much to talk about this from a win-loss perspective. I think that, while Gamecock fans will not be happy escaping with a 3-point win or a 1-point win, all you got to do right now is get Lenore Sellers' feet wet and get out with a win. But moving on from Old Dominion, the Gamecock schedule gets real in week 2. In week 2, you're heading to Kentucky. If all of you missed it, Alex and I kind of went through our SEC preview last week, so you can always go back. All these episodes are evergreen as long as, I guess through the next 2 weeks, Alex. I mean, things can change.
Yeah.
But so South Carolina heads at Kentucky in week 2, and this is going to be me and Alex's preview of the season. So, Alex, I'm going to give you a win over Old Dominion, and I'll take a win as well. What is your take against Kentucky?
So with Kentucky, I'm really interested to kind of watch some of their game in week 1 because having a new quarterback in Brock Vandergriff, I'm really interested to see how that kind of comes together. A guy who, a little unproven, but, has a chance to prove himself kind of early. And it's going to be South Carolina's going to be his first SEC start, so, they have some pieces to replace offensively. Ray Davis has gone, but, they got a guy in Chip Trainum who's the Ohio State transfer, but I don't think it's really 100% sure if he's going to play in that game with his broken hand. So, I think it's going to be a close game. I lean right now towards South Carolina with a 3-point win or so and somewhere in that range. But, I think we'll see we'll know a little bit more about both of those teams here after this week. But, I think it's going to be close. And I think it's almost like a 50-50 game right now.
Yeah, I would not disagree with you at all. I think that South Carolina has won 2 in a row against Kentucky. Obviously, you have 2 years ago when Will Levis was injured, and it was just a complete back crap scenario, like against a backup quarterback. I think that South Carolina has more talent than Kentucky, but it's all about Kentucky and the defense.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden, Lenore Sellers is getting pressured like Spencer Rattler got pressured at South Carolina, is Lenore's ready to make the quick throws that Spencer did? I don't know, but right now I'm going to go a win for South Carolina, and I'm going to give you a win as well. The next one is a home game, LSU. You went first on the Kentucky game, so I'll go first on the LSU game. I have not been impressed with LSU outside of elite playmakers, and they had 2 wide receivers, I think, drafted in the first round. They had obviously the Heisman Trophy winner last year, and Jaden Daniels, a guy. If you had listened to this show a year and a half ago, I was telling you, place your Heisman Trophy bets on Jaden Daniels. He's going to win it. But maybe I'm crazy, Alex, but I do not believe in Nussmeier, whatever his name is, the quarterback. I think Lenore's is better. I think that 2-0 Williams-Brice is going to be a tough place to come play. And LSU goes up and they go down. They go up and they go down.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take South Carolina to win. I'm not going to be as brave as you and actually say by how many points, but I will take South Carolina to beat LSU. What do you say, Alex?
I'm leaning towards agreeing right now that they're going to win that game. And I think with LSU, we're going to learn a lot about them here on Sunday night against Southern Cal. And, if they come out and find a way to and look really good against Southern Cal, maybe that changes my prediction. But as of right now, I'm going to say a win because of just how much they have to replace offensively.
Well, for the record, Alex, if they go out and just boat race Southern Cal, we do a prediction every single week, so we can change our predictions later. We're going to make this prediction right now. Against Akron, I'm going to put you down for a loss for South Carolina. I think that's the way you're leaning.
Absolutely not.
All right, so right now, Alex and I both have the Gamecocks 4-0 headed into their bye week before Ole Miss comes to town. And, there's a lot of storylines with Ole Miss. Obviously, Juice Wells, big one. We'll see if he plays. kind of like Marshawn Lloyd, who's now with the Green Bay Packers and doesn't want to practice anymore and doesn't want to get treatment, and all of a sudden decided like, hey, I got my contract. I'll just hang out for a little bit. I didn't say that. That's what Marshawn Lloyd decided to do. So with Ole Miss, this is probably, I don't know, is the biggest game on the schedule, like in the first half of the season.
Yeah, and I think in the end it could end up being the toughest game on the schedule, just with the talent that Ole Miss has, all over the field offensively. Like Jackson Dart's one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, maybe the best, and obviously one of the best in the country. And they did so well in the transfer portal, especially on that perimeter and especially on the defensive line, that this one's going to be tough for South Carolina.
Yeah, I think we're both dancing around it a little bit. I think that 4-0 going into Ole Miss is a great opportunity for South Carolina. I also am very well aware that Ole Miss has 48 or something new players on their roster this season. This will be the first test for Ole Miss in this football season. I think a bye week helps South Carolina going into this game. And I think that the defense is really good for South Carolina this year. And I'm going to go a win.
Oh,
Alex.
wow.
And I promise I'm not picking a win every game. I'm not going to be that guy. But I do think there's a big opportunity for South Carolina to win that game. I think there's going to be a lot of juice in that stadium. So I'm going to go win, Alex.
You're putting me on the spot, aren't you?
I'm not trying to. I'm not trying
Yeah,
to.
I mean, really. I think it's going to be close. I just think in the end, Ole Miss maybe has too many weapons offensively. I think it's going to be close. I'm going to go with a loss.
And all of Gamecock Nation
hates
just
me now.
died, Alex.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, golly, if they're on the Big Spur, go ahead and hit Alex up and let him know that he thinks Juice Wells is going to have his Heisman coming out party against the Gamecocks.
I didn't say that. I think
all right.
I think it's going to be a really close game, and you're right on the South Carolina's defense, and the juice that game's going to have. It's just Jackson Dart and what they have offensively is just it's really, really good. And not saying that South Carolina's defense can't contain it or limit them, but I'm gonna have to go with a loss, close loss.
Ugh, Alex, Gamecock Nation hates you right now. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I know. And
well, you're not going to make them feel any better right now. So, after Ole Miss, Gamecocks travel to Tuscaloosa. Alex, I mean, should I just go ahead and put L by 100 points by you right now?
No, but you're going first on this one again.
All right. And look, I'm making notes right here. It's an interesting game for me. Kalen DeBoer is a really good coach. Obviously, just took Washington to the national championship. And Jalen Milroe showed me more last year than I thought he would. He's my dark horse Heisman Trophy winner this season. And I've been to Tuscaloosa before. I was there for the 4 straight throws to Alshon Jeffrey on the fade. It was a little bit after my 21st birthday. I don't remember it very well, but I was there. I think that Tuscaloosa is just too much for Lenore Sellers. I mean, this will be his first true road game after Kentucky, and Kentucky isn't the most formidable atmosphere. So I will take the Gamecocks to unfortunately drop from the undefeated ranks. But I will say if the Gamecocks win the 5 games that I have them, they will be top 10 in the country when they lose to Alabama.
Yeah, I'm leaning the same way you are on this one. It's just, Alabama, even though Nick Saban's gone, still got a loaded program, and it's going to be a tough test for South Carolina. And, I think they're going to have their moments in that game, but I'm going to have to go with a loss.
All right, so Alex has the Gamecocks at 4-2 after 6 games. Matt, your hero, has the Gamecocks at 5-1. After that, Gamecocks have another road trip, and it'll be to Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma. I know a lot of Gamecock fans are making plans to go to this game. With Oklahoma, it's kind of I don't know. throw some balls in the air and see which one has a win on it when you catch it. I don't know. Oklahoma has some questions. I think they're going to have a pretty good defense. I'm not absolutely sure about their offense, but that is a Brett Venables team. I lean towards it being a tough game, but if the Gamecocks are able to get through Kentucky, LSU, and Ole Miss, and then a loss to Alabama, they're going to have to pick themselves up off the mat. And it's a tough one. You got a bye week coming up, so maybe something happens, but I'm going to go with a loss to Oklahoma, and I hate doing it.
Well, I'm going to kind of turn the tables on you here. I think South Carolina may end up winning this game. I think
okay.
You kind of mentioned the question marks Oklahoma has. Like, they got a really good linebacker in Danny Stutzman, who's really good. And, Brent Venables is always going to have a really good defense. But, just wonder what they're going to be offensively, losing Dylan Gabriel and bringing in a new quarterback. So, I'm going to go with a win here. I'm going to go with a close win.
I love it because something we talked about in a previous episode was that the Gamecocks would beat Oklahoma or Alabama this year. And it was, pretty big prediction. And you said they would win one of those games. So kudos to you. Kudos to you, Alex, for continuing that. Yeah, for sure. So you got a bye week, and then you have homecoming at Williams-Brice Stadium against Texas A&M. It's an interesting one to me. I think that South Carolina obviously does not have a great history against Texas A&M, but they won the last one they played. What are your thoughts, Alex?
Yeah, Texas A&M's a really interesting team. Like, I feel like I've said this 1,000 times already, but we're going to learn a lot about them in week 1, going up against Notre Dame, having college game day there. They're going to be on the big stage in week 1. And, Mike Elko's a really good coach. And, I kind of, all right, you're going to go first on the prediction again, because I'm not sure where I'm leaning.
All right, I'm taking the Gamecocks. I think that, like I said, they've beaten Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, lost to Alabama, lost to Oklahoma, have a bye week. Now they're playing Texas A&M at home on homecoming. They've already proven their mettle, and I think that during the bye week, they figure out a way to do it.
I agree. I think it's going to be another win for South Carolina. So what do I have them as now?
We both have them at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 2.
Okay.
Right now, 6 and 2. All right, then you got Vanderbilt. Let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
W, West Side. All right, then you got Missouri. 7 and 2, and Missouri coming to Williams-Brice Stadium.
Oh man. Missouri defensively has a lot to replace. I can't remember the exact number, but when I was doing their preview, I was kind of surprised or kind of caught off guard at just how much they have to replace. And Blake Baker's going to be at LSU now, so I think he's a really good coordinator. So, but offensively they got a lot. Luther Burden, Brady Cook, all those guys.
I'm just laughing at the fact that we're going to have the Gamecocks like 9 and 3 or 10 and 2.
I know.
All right, man. Like, come on, just like make
I'm going to
Shane Beamer. Shane Beamer is never going to allow you to go back to a press conference. I swear, Alex.
I know.
I'm gonna go win because I think Missouri's overachieved. Then Wofford win, and man, what are you gonna do here, Alex Jones? The game at Clemson. I mean, gosh.
So what's my record right now?
Right now, you got the. Does the record matter or does the teams matter?
No, I'm just interested in what I have them.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You got the Gamecocks at 8 and 3 right now, man. And I got the Gamecocks at 9 and 2.
So I think with Clemson, looking at what they have this year, you got Cade Klubnik, but if something were to happen to Cade, like I'm not sure where they turn to at quarterback. Same thing at running back. You got Phil Maffa, and it's just a little bit of unproven, depth behind them. So if they're both healthy, Clemson's always a tough place to play. But South kind of found a way to win that game 2 years ago using special teams, and I'm torn on it. It's a 50-50 game for me really right now.
Flip a coin. Here, I got one. You ready? I'll flip a coin.
Okay.
All right. Heads, Gamecocks or Clemson? You got to pick it.
Tails, Gamecocks.
It's tails.
All right, then.
All right. So Alex Jones has picked the Gamecocks to beat Clemson, and Matt Anderson is a company man, so he will as well. So I got the Gamecocks at 10-2.
Jeez.
Alex Jones has them at 9-3. 10-2. Make your plans for the college football playoff. It's happening. 9-3. I just don't know, Alex. Can they make it at 9-3? You're doubting the Gamecocks making the college football playoff. Can you really do that?
Yeah, I don't know. Like 9-3 would be an incredible season. You know, when you look at this team, like just kind of going back to what we've predicted so far, like Kentucky's a huge game, and you know, just for where the season goes, like you go 2 and you find a way to go 2-0, beat Old Dominion, Kentucky. You know, I think there's a lot on the table. Obviously, being 2-0, but you know, I got a feeling that they're going to get 1-1 out of LSU and Ole Miss. You know, I think they'll beat one of those teams, and I'm leaning towards LSU just from what I said earlier. And, you know, I think there's just a lot of toss-up games that, you know, down the road they're going to, you know, continue to be toss-ups, and we'll see where these teams stand. But, you know, if South Carolina can find a way to win their share of, you know, these toss-up games, like, you know, I could see obviously I think they're going to get to 6 wins, and I'm feeling pretty confident on that. You know, and if you find a way to win some of those toss-up games, you know, you can maybe get to 7, 8, you know. I know I said 9-3 is what I said. You know, we see the route that they can get there, but you know, I think even an 8-4 season would be really, really good.
Well, I think the floor is 6. If the Gamecocks don't win 6, that's a much bigger issue.
Yeah,
quite frankly, if the Gamecocks win 5 games, I think that there needs to be conversations about where the Gamecocks go forward, and maybe that's changes on the coaching staff. I don't know. I'm a big believer in Shane. I'm a big believer in Dowell Loggins. I'm a big believer in Clayton White and all the coaches. Like, please do not hear this the wrong way, but it's the toughest league in the country, bar none. And you're not going to beat people out coaching them. You have to have the players. And Ellis Johnson said that on Inside the Gamecocks the other day. But I do think the players are in place. So that's why I say like the floor. I think the floor is 6, and like I'm not joking around when I say that the ceiling's 10. I think that if things break the right way, when you look at bye weeks and where the Gamecocks, you know, come off bye weeks, and you know, we'll see. I'm not saying 10-2 is the prescription.
Right. I think the 4-game stretch of Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma, A&M, like obviously that's a really difficult stretch, but that's kind of going to make or break South Carolina's season. Like, find a way to get 2 of those wins, I think you're feeling pretty good. You know, and you get any more than that, obviously you're feeling really good. But that's the key stretch right there. And you know, those first 4 games before that bye week, if you can find a way to get 3-1, and I mean, if you're 4-0, like obviously that's great. But if you find a way to get to 3-1 before that 4-game stretch, like, you know, I think you're putting yourself in a pretty good spot entering that. You know, I think probably their most difficult stretch of the season.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. So 10-2, my prediction. Alex is 9-3. We've told you the ways that it can go for us or against us. And we'd be happy. We would love to hear y'all's take on this, by the way. I mean, everyone has a season prediction. I know that, you know, Gamecocks wear a pair of garnet glasses in every opportunity they have. And look, you know, it's not crazy. Before we get out of here, Alex, I am going to go through the SEC football slate this week. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just did want to get this out there. Thursday night, you have 2 games. You have Arkansas Pine Bluff at Arkansas. Arkansas is favored by 48.5 points. The over-under is 57. So the implied score is Arkansas 52 and Arkansas Pine Bluff 4. I might just go ahead and take Arkansas Pine Bluff, their team over, which would probably be like 3 or 5, whatever. Murray State plays at Missouri. Missouri State at Missouri on Thursday. Missouri is a 48-point favorite, over under 57.5. And then when you get to Friday night, Temple at Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a 42.5-point favorite. Saturday, the big game, and me and Alex will talk about it a little bit later. Clemson versus Georgia in Atlanta. Georgia is a 13.5-point favorite, over under 48.5. The implied point total there is Georgia 31, Clemson 17.5. Saturday at 12, you have Virginia Tech versus Vanderbilt. Virginia Tech is a 13.5-point favorite, over under 48. 12:45, you have Chattanooga versus Tennessee. Tennessee is a 38.5-point favorite, over under 57. By the way, all of these lines come from DraftKings. So if you're going to play these games, go to DraftKings. Those are the lines I'm using as of 2 p.m. Miami at Florida. Miami -2.5, over under 54. Colorado State at Texas. Texas -32.5, over under 60. Big number there. We already talked about this, but Old Dominion at South Carolina. South Carolina -21, over under 52. Eastern Kentucky at Mississippi State. Mississippi State -25.5, over under 60. Western Kentucky at Alabama. This one kind of surprised me. Alabama -31.5, over under 59.5. Furman at Ole Miss. Ole Miss -42, over under 60.5. Just if you want to bet it, just take Ole Miss because they're going to murder people. Lane Kiffin murders people when he has the opportunity to. He doesn't do it every time, but he will murder you if he gets the chance. Another big one here, Notre Dame at Texas A&M. Texas A&M is -3, over under 46.5. Alex, this one was actually interesting to me because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the former Duke quarterback is now the quarterback at Notre Dame. Isn't that Riley Leonard?
Yeah.
And so Texas A&M coach coached him at Duke, which is interesting to me. So Texas A&M -3, over under 46.5. Alabama A&M at Auburn. Auburn -48, over under 56.5. Southern Miss at Kentucky. Interesting. We need to pay attention to this one, Alex.
Yep.
Kentucky -28, over under 50. They're saying Kentucky 39, Southern Miss 11. And then you get to Monday night. LSU versus Southern Cal in Las Vegas. LSU -4.5, over under 64. So that is the SEC slate this weekend. We got to wait till next week until we have SEC teams actually playing SEC teams. Alex, what are the odds that the SEC goes 16-0 this week?
I think the SEC is going to come out this weekend with a pretty good record, just with the FCS, lower level games, that how many of those are. But that Florida Miami game is one that's really interesting. Notre Dame.
We'll talk about that in a second. But do you think, what are like 80% chance the SEC goes undefeated? 50% chance SEC goes undefeated?
I'll go 70%, 70 to 80%.
All right, that's a hell of a money line. Just throw all your money on the SEC team. So, Alex, I pulled together some best bets of the weekend. And for those of you guys that were, or gals that were not here last year, I usually pull 5 games. I try and keep them top 25 games if I can, just because that's what most people are going to watch. But so, Alex, you're getting this in real time. You don't know which way I'm going, and I'm sorry for that, but I picked 5 this week. So Saturday at 12 noon, you have Clemson at Georgia. Georgia is minus 13.5 points, and the over-under is 48.5 points. Georgia is projected to win this game 31-17.5. Do you have a lean here?
Yeah, I think for one, the under is going to hit on this one. I think it's 2 really good defensive teams going at it, and I'm going to lean Georgia to get the win.
So you're going to take the under?
Yeah.
Under 40.5? Okay. I like that. I almost took it. I got you marked in blue, me in yellow. I'm taking Georgia minus 13.5 because I've seen Cade Klubnik try and play football before, and Georgia just has way more talent. All right, and it's in Atlanta.
Yeah.
All right, so the next game on our best bet segment, Penn State at West Virginia. Penn State is minus 7.5, over under 51.5. Penn State 30, West Virginia 21.5. What are your thoughts there?
What's the line you say on that one?
Penn State, this is like 2:00 today. So
Yeah.
Penn State minus 7.5, over under 51.5.
I think this one's going to be close, but I think Penn State kind of runs away with it towards the end. I'm going to go Penn State to win by 10.
So we have Phil Mullinax, our fearless producer. He just weighed in. He's taking West Virginia plus the points. Or Phil, if you're still here, is that West Virginia money line? Because that would be pretty tasty. While Phil answers this, I'm taking Penn State minus 7.5 as my best bet. Okay, Phil says points, but won't be surprised if they win. All right, so I'm going to take Penn State. I'm like, Alex, what'd you pick?
I said I think they're going to beat the spread. I think they're going to win by 10.
All right, so me and Alex are united here, and Phil is on an island. He's taking the plus 7.5, and next week Phil's gonna be like, "I told you so." All right, so the next game that we have is at 3:30, Miami at Florida, and Miami is a 2.5-point favorite, over under 54. Miami, this isn't right, but Miami 28 to Florida 25. What's your take on that?
Oh man, I think I said last week that Florida was going to win. I think.
Time out. I have the receipts.
Okay.
1 second. So Alex took Florida, so you got to take the 2.5.
Yeah, I do. I think it's going to be a field goal game. I think Florida wins.
All right, so Alex is taking the 2.5.
Yeah,
I'm taking the under 54. So me and Alex won't be too far off on this. I just don't think either team's actually really great at football. And I think that scoring 54 points combined when a coach refuses to take a knee and fumbles away the game, trying to get a guy 100 yards, like I just don't trust that coach. So I'm going to take under 54. The next one, Alex, Notre Dame at Texas A&M. Notre Dame is a 3-point underdog. Texas A&M favored by 3, over under 46.5, which basically equates to Texas A&M 25, Notre Dame 22. Thoughts on that?
Kind of leaned in the under again on this one. I believe, I think Mike Elko's a defensive guy. What'd you say the spread is currently Notre Dame or Texas A&M what?
Texas A&M -3.
-3, okay. So it's pretty close on that. I think Texas A&M. I'm gonna take the under, but I think Texas A&M wins by 6 or 7.
Okay. I mean, I'm going back to the fact that Mike Elko knows the Riley Leonard, the quarterback of Notre Dame, pretty well. So I'm going Texas A&M -3. So you got the under, I got the -3. I feel good about that. And then we could not leave you guys hanging. Monday night, there is still a bet to be made. And that is the LSU Southern Cal football game. LSU -4.5. Over under 64 points.
Golly.
So it's basically looking like LSU 34.5, 35, Southern Cal 30. What's your take on this one, Alex?
I hate to do it again, but take the under.
I'm taking the under, my man.
What we talked about with LSU earlier, having so much to replace, it's a lot of points that they're going to have to combine to score. And, I think I'll take the under.
Yeah, so for me on this one, Alex, I just kind of thought about it. Like you had LSU and you had Southern Cal. two of the teams that just scored the most points in NCAA football last year. And what did you lose? 2 years ago's Heisman Trophy winning candidate, the number one pick in the NFL draft, and then last year's Heisman Trophy winner. Like, I think the public is just overselling. 64.5 is a lot of points on a neutral field.
In the first game of the season, too. Like, I mean,
yeah. So, I mean, that is my best bet. Like, honestly. So I kind of just did some math here quickly. Give or take whatever me and Alex said. If you want to throw $5 on it, you might make $120. You want to throw $100 on it, you might make $2,400. But as I said last year, and I will say again this year, please do not bet money that you cannot afford to lose. If you have a gambling problem, please seek help. And I will be betting $5 on each one of these. So if I lose 25 times 12, haven't lost my entire house. So, and I don't know if Alex gambles or not, but anyway, appreciate you guys so much. Would love to hear y'all's picks. We will be back here actually Sunday night. Sunday night we'll be joined by Joe. Alex might know how to pronounce his last name. I haven't talked to him yet to hear it. Yeah, so Joe Macheca and Alex and I are going to do a Sunday night show. We're going to be recapping Shane Beamer's press conference, talking about the games. I do not know what network or what YouTube channel that'll be right now. But at the end of the day, we'll be here Sunday night. We'll tell you how to find us on the Big Spur. And looking forward to it. It's football season. And Alex and I have talked about potentially doing some impromptu shows as well. So stay locked in here. We're so excited to spend this time with all of you. And, we appreciate you all giving us the most valuable thing you have, which is your time. And we'll be around, and you can find Alex Jones at Alex_Jones45. You can find me at Late Night Gamecock Show on Twitter. Fair warning, I don't check my Twitter very often, but I know Alex does because he's got to talk
every day, all the time, 24/7.
But you can always find us on thebigspur.com. So we appreciate you all joining us so much. We hope you have a great rest of the week. Gamecocks start on Saturday. Make sure you check out Inside the Gamecocks the rest of the week too. And we will see you guys soon. Have a great evening. Bye, everybody.